So here we are down in Drumshanbo. Because of the COVID regulations, we've moved outside of the studio environment and we're joined by Sligo Rovers' Niall Morahan for a little chat about, I suppose, the season so far, but also your career to date. Niall, you're very welcome to the programme.
Thanks for having me.
It's been an interesting season for Sligo because I think you've probably been the surprise package of that division. Bad start, COVID came in, and since the restart it's really been probably one of the form sides in the division.
Yeah, I think like you said, maybe the slow start obviously kind of had us as that surprise package coming back. Maybe no one expected us to kind of take off the way we did, and but I think, as I've said to you before, I think if the season maintained its natural course, we would have started to put in performances like we did when we returned, and thankfully it moved us a lot further up the table.
Let's talk about the last couple of weeks, and then we might go back and take a look through some of the notable instances in your career. In terms of the last couple of weeks, there's been 2 weeks where you haven't had a game effectively, but you're still, after last night's result against Dundalk, we're recording this on Wednesday, you've just dropped out of the top half of the division for the first time. It kind of feels weird for Sligo in recent seasons because they haven't been at that end of the league table. They've been hovering lower mid-table, so to be in that position, it must be nice as a squad and as an individual player to be kind of looking at yourself towards the top of the table.
Yeah, of course. Obviously the last few seasons we have been hovering around the lower end, cutting it quite tight at certain occasions, so it's nice to have that bit of breathing space. But as a group and as a club, we want to be moving further up the table, and I think when we were in third a few games back, it was the highest position the club had been in a long time. So obviously Dundalk have a lot of games in hand on us, and I think they'll secure the third European spot, so it's kind of between ourselves, St Pat's and Waterford to battle it out for that final European spot. So hopefully we can get that. It'll be a massive boost for the club. It's
a very strange season. Obviously COVID has affected everything across the entire country and across the entire planet, but from an Airtricity League point of view, it's, when you look at the whole situation, you win on Sunday potentially could put you into third place in the league table, albeit Dundalk with games in hand, but a defeat also could put you into third last in the table. It's one of those really weird yo-yo seasons where a lot of the teams in the middle of the table seem to be pretty much on a par with each other.
Yeah, it is. It's fairly hectic, all right. I suppose there's not a massive amount between the teams as it is in general. Anyone can beat anyone on their day, you know. So like I said, when we went from being bottom up to third, and now we're kind of down to sixth again, so it is fairly yo-yo. So you just kind of have to be on your game the whole time and kind of treat every game like a cup final, I suppose.
If we go back to the restart, that win against Derry caught a lot of people by surprise given the form that both teams had shown in. They were just a few weeks out of playing in Europe. You hadn't won a point. I think the only person who managed to get on the score sheet from play was yourself at that stage of the season. It's very different now. The goals have been pretty much free-flowing for Sligo over the last couple of weeks. Some big scores in there, but also on the other side, defending has been a bit of an issue, and there's been some high-scoring games that you've come out on the right end of, but also on the wrong end of. What's the view within the camp about the last 3 games in the season and where you're going to finish up at the end of the season?
Obviously we realise it's a massive run-in. I think I won't say an easier run-in, but it's probably not as tough as other teams have of a run-in. So I think, like I said, we just kind of have to treat every game like a cup final and just kind of go out and see where it takes us, because I think the last few games, picking up a loss or two, especially against Waterford, a draw against St Pat's, it's kind of taken the fate of our season out of our own hands and putting it into the odds of the balance, you know. So we just kind of have to go out and try and put it back into our hands and pick up as many points as we can.
Shells this weekend, as we said, a win could put you as high as third or fourth on the table. A defeat sees them leapfrog you. In terms of the game, how do you approach a game like that at the weekend? Is there a fear of losing the game, or is it a determination to go and win the game that will dominate, I suppose, the proceedings for you?
I think it's absolutely determination to go and win the game. We know that they are breathing down our necks, but we know what's on the other side of that. We know that we can leapfrog another team or two ahead of us, so it really is, like I said again, a cup final.
In terms of, I suppose, the way the season has panned out so far, you look at the performances and that a team with limited resources and really pulled together at very last minute, both in February when the transfer window was open and again in the middle of the season with new arrivals coming in. What is it about Liam and John that they've brought to that equation that maybe was missing in previous?
I'm not quite sure, to be honest. Obviously, since I've come in, I had one season under Jared Little, and the following season Liam came in and there was a big clear out. So he's been here for 2 years now, and obviously last year wasn't our best year either, but this year, maybe because the group has been, or a good majority of the group has been around for quite a while, we know each other, we know our playing styles, and we know where we want to go as a group. And I think they've brought in other players that kind of want to get onto that same wavelength as us, I suppose. So that obviously contributes to it as well, you know.
You've played a lot of time this year, maybe more so than you did last year, but you've been ever present apart from that one suspension. We might talk about that in a second, but in terms of your own game time, you must be happy with the amount of time you're playing on the pitch.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm pretty much playing week in, week out at the moment, and that's what every player wants. And I suppose more this season I'm getting it in my favoured position in the middle of the park. So yeah, listen, I'm just delighted to be playing week in, week out, and that's what you want, isn't it?
I suppose as we're sitting here in Drumshanbo recording this, I don't know if you're aware, but the Ireland are playing Finland as we're talking at the moment. There's 2 former Sligo Rovers players in that starting lineup for Ireland today, Sean Maguire and Darrell Horgan. Probably, to be fair, both better known in other roles with other clubs, but both did come through the Showgrounds in their history. We look at Ed McGinty on the bench last night for Ireland under 21. Last season, that was you, under 19s. You played in a couple of the qualifiers for the European Championships. So went to those European Championships, although picked up an injury and didn't really participate in that competition. Do you look at that as a realistic target for where you can end up personally out of Sligo Rovers? Is that achievable from your current position in the club?
100%, yeah, I do think so. Obviously, especially myself showing last year, Ed showing this year, and like you said, former players showing that the pathway is there. And I don't think that's any different, or will be any different for myself or other younger players coming up through the club. Talk
about some of the younger players coming through the club, because how aware are you, because you would have come through that under 17 squad with Daniel Leary, Colin Jinks, moved on to Dinky and Raf and others involved with the under 19s, on to Jared, and then now obviously Liam and John. In terms of how that's progressed, do you keep an eye on what's coming behind you, or are you very much now a kind of a always looking forward kind of guy?
I would be keeping an eye. Obviously, having gone through all that, the whole process myself, I would keep an eye, and there wouldn't be a massive age difference between myself and a few of the other lads coming up. But yeah, I'd obviously keep an eye on results and promising players coming through, and I think as years have shown in the past, there is still a lot of good talent coming through the club.
Without putting too much pressure on any one individual player, is there anyone who's caught your eye that you think maybe has a future in the bit of red jersey?
I definitely do think so. If you've been keeping up to date, I think Johnny Kenny's been banging in the goals for Sligo, and his old owl fella was quite the player as well, I think. So
you wouldn't have seen Johnny play live, but
I've heard all right, yeah. But yeah, I think he's seeming to be following in his footsteps a bit.
Let's talk about your own start in the sport. What first attracted you to, I suppose, soccer? Because we're here in Drumshanbo, it's where you went to primary school. Yeah. I suppose your family are well ensconced in this place. Your uncle lives probably in shot across the road. You grew up here. Your mum's from here. In terms of soccer, it wouldn't exactly be known as a soccer town. Essentially, it doesn't even have its own club. No. How did you end up playing soccer?
Yeah, like you said, I think it was in the southern half of the county. There was only 1 or 2 clubs, if even, and 3 in the whole county, I think. So yeah, Drumshanbo, it's not a massive soccer town, or Leitrim Village even, but I suppose as a young fella I was kind of interested in all sports, and my parents would have encouraged that as well. So I think I would have been 5, 6, 7, I can't pinpoint it now, but I would have been going into the AstroTurf in Ora on Saturday mornings, and that's kind of where I started.
So that would have been with Carrick Town, and of course you played a couple of years with Carrick Town. You left after a couple of years to go to Strand Celtic. Was that because there was no team in Carrick, or just you felt you'd outgrown maybe the potential there?
I don't think it was because I thought I had grown. It's kind of, I think about it quite a bit. If there was still a team there, would things have panned out the same if I had stayed? But yeah, at the team there wasn't enough numbers the following year, sadly, and I decided to go to Strand Hill. And the big pull for me there was I had the option to play under 15 and under 16 football, which was obviously a big factor for my development, to be playing an age up, and I think that stood to me. So that is kind of what helped my decision to travel down to Strand Hill.
Of course, the following year took you into Sligo Rovers, and you were playing a year up there as well, under 17.
Yeah.
That's never seemed to phase you when you've taken those steps forward in age groups, maybe outside of your own comfort zone.
Yeah, I think, like I said, it's kind of stood to me, especially recently in my career, playing against people older than you. And I think a lot of people say that if you are younger and you're playing against older boys or older girls or anyone, it kind of brings your game on.
In terms of, I suppose, the major checkpoints that you've hit over the last few years, I suppose that first team appearance, I know I think it was down in Limerick. You came on as a sub. I think we've spoken about it before on the show, but how big a night was that, and versus maybe how big a night was your first contract signing? Like, which was more important to you?
I think just getting on the pitch for the first time it's what everyone dreams of, you know. I don't think I kicked the ball that day, but just to get on the pitch and kind of see everything happening, it was a big moment for me. Yeah.
First start, of course, came at the end of that season. Shamrock Rovers at home in the Showgrounds, last game of the season. Kind of a game to nothing. The manager's changing. You know who the new manager's going to be coming in. Your chance to impress him, but you won man of the match in that first start. Did you realise at that stage that you were going to go on to have the next couple of seasons that you've had?
I would have certainly hoped for it, all right, but no, I didn't. I wasn't massively thinking that far down the line. Obviously, at the time, I was just quite nervous for my first start, and I just went out, and thankfully I had a good game, you know. Like you said, it was a nothing game really, end of the season, but it was my first start, so I kind of wanted to give it everything, you know. But I think that kind of set a standard for myself, and I feel I've progressed a lot since then, but I kind of hold myself to giving it everything and putting in my best performance.
In terms of that game, because obviously people talk about moments and being in the right place at the right time, the fact that new manager in the stand watching the game, your player of the match, does that put you on a bit of a better footing with him, maybe going on, that when he comes in he's like, well, that lad can cut it at this level?
I suppose as a new group, I kind of level playing field, I suppose, but I certainly don't think it did me any harm anyways.
In terms of the European qualification and the European Championships, was that expected? Well, I know you obviously, every kid dreams of playing for Ireland and dreams of getting a call up, but when you hit a certain stage, I think maybe the realistic chances of that call up are less and less and less as you get older. So you were 18 or 19 years of age already. Did you expect to get the call up when it happened? Had you any inkling that it might possibly happen for you?
To be honest, no. I was getting, I suppose, all the way up, I was seeing players in like the under 17 team, under 19 team getting call ups, and I was wondering, like, what's going on? Why am I getting a call up, you know? But I think I've always said it, you just kind of have to keep plugging away and not get too bogged down. I would have got bogged down in past occasions, but I suppose I kind of stopped thinking about it in a way and just kind of took it day by day, game by game, and thankfully my form in the first team kind of helped that, you know, and kind of took me by surprise a bit. I went up to the trials for the very first time, and it was obviously quite a nerve-wracking moment, but I just kind of gave it my everything, didn't think much of it, and then a while later I got the call up, I suppose. So. And
you got that call quite late into that qualifying round in terms of getting over to Russia, I think at the time. How frenetic was that? Did you have time to actually let that sink in terms of how big of a deal that was actually getting selected for your country?
It was obviously a massive moment at the time, getting the email or the phone call or text, or can't really remember what it was, but
such a massive moment you can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was an email, but I just remember looking at it and thinking, like, oh my god, like it's happening, you know. But I think there was a quick turnaround between meeting up with the squad and flying out. Yeah, it was just a surreal moment, you know.
Describe going onto the pitch, first time in a green jersey. You're about to maybe take the first throw in or free kick, or just take your first touch in the match. What's going through your head?
So yeah, I think it was we had 3 games. First game against Romania, I kind of wasn't really expecting to play, and I didn't. And the second game, it was against Azerbaijan. Came on the last few minutes, and obviously when you're told to go warm up, you're like, okay, I'm coming on, I got to get ready. And then when you're actually standing on the sideline waiting to go on, it's a nerve-wracking moment, I suppose. You just kind of have to gather yourself and realise you go on and you have a job to do. But then obviously once the final whistle blows, you're like, right, I just made my debut for my country, you know, and it's obviously a proud moment. And then my first start came a few days later against Russia, and that was probably an even better moment, I suppose. You're standing in the tunnel with your jersey on, and you're getting ready to walk out and then the national anthem and everything. So it's something you dream of, you know.
Let's talk about that experience for a moment, because you mentioned making your debut in the last couple of minutes of a game, and then the whole experience of starting the game, maybe the anthems, the lineup, just even getting onto the pitch in that formation. Not to put a kind of a damper on it, but is there a difference between starting a game and being in that starting 11, the manager's choice, and coming on for the last couple of minutes in a match?
I think so, yeah. Everyone wants to play, everyone wants to start every game. Sometimes you just can't, especially in situations like that. You're new to a group, you're new to international football, and obviously if you told me before going out you're going to come on and you're going to start one game, I would have bit your hand off, you know. So but yeah, I think in terms of club football, obviously now you do want to start every game. So yeah, that would kind of be it.
Let's talk about the suspension. I know we don't want to, but let's talk about, first of all, the 2 yellow cards, the sending off. What's your thoughts on the incidents that led to the dismissal in the first case?
I suppose just to address it, I think it's bound to happen over the course of a season. It's a long season, you know. I suppose I will say I've learned my lesson at this stage. 2 yellows, yeah. Both of them were avoidable. The first one, it was for dissent. I thought it was harsh enough myself, but the ref had warned me, to be fair, but I kind of didn't pass any heed. And the second one, it was 92nd minute, I think. It was my own doing. Took a bad touch. It was nicked off me, and kind of without even thinking, I stuck my arm out, and as people say, your man made a meal of it. But yeah, it was avoidable, and I suppose it's never nice to be sent off, especially when you know there's 10 lads against 11 on the pitch, and if something goes wrong, it's your fault now, I suppose. So yeah, well, obviously wasn't the nicest moment of my career.
92nd minute though, it doesn't really have that big of an impact in that particular game, but then the suspension that it brings with it, minimum 1, possibly even more. In your case, it was just the 1 game. How do you then react for the next week or 2 in training? Because you've got all week knowing that no matter how well you do in training, you're not going to be part of that squad on Saturday or Friday night. Does that come into it at all, or is it really just a case of knuckle down and help everyone else get to that game night?
It's definitely a case of knuckle down, because obviously if you're not in the team, that team goes out and wins at the weekend, then you're out of the team, you know, I suppose, in a way. So you kind of can't just take it handy, I have no game at the weekend, let's do as you please. But it's definitely a case of yeah, just going out in training every day and kind of showing your worth.
I suppose you've come straight back into the team as well after the suspension, which speaks, I suppose, to the level that you've reached this year, and I suppose what they think of you down in the club in terms of Liam when he's selecting that team. A couple of weeks' time, you face Derry in a FAI Cup quarter-final. You've been in the semi-final last year. It's probably the biggest highlight of last season. Massive capacity crowd in the Showgrounds. It's gone very different now in terms of match night experience. How does it compare now behind closed doors versus maybe the atmosphere, that carnival feel of a FAI Cup semi-final?
Obviously a cup semi-final, it's a massive occasion, and especially down in Sligo, it's a packed ground, you know, and I think that it usually stands to us as a team. I've said it before, and it's kind of like the 12th man. Last year we did put it up to Dundalk, and I think it was sickener in the last few minutes to go behind. But yeah, obviously running out onto the pitch in front of a packed Showgrounds, it's something that's, once again, it's surreal, you know. So it's a pity that if we do get to the semi-final stage again this year, hopefully we do, that the crowd won't be there, so it is a real pity. Before
that stage though, you do have that hurdle of Derry City, as we mentioned. The current situation, I don't really like bringing politics and health and stuff into a sports interview, but as a human who's involved in I suppose a work situation that potentially brings you up against people coming from one of the hardest hit areas in the UK and Ireland at the moment, is there anything going through your head maybe about a concern about being on that pitch with with people who live in that environment. I know they're in a little bit of a bubble themselves, but they do still live in communities in Derry and Strabane and that kind of neck of the woods.
That's a tough one, you know. I think it would if I suppose if you knew there was a chance some of them had it and that they could give it to you and you could say pass it on to your family, your relations, your grandparents. That definitely would play a part in your mind. But I suppose hopefully with all protocols that are in place, that'll be nipped in the bud before the match even takes place, you know. So hopefully it doesn't come to that. Obviously there was talk of the country going back into lockdown within the last week, so we were hoping that the league wouldn't go, and thankfully it hasn't yet. So yeah, hopefully with protocols that are in place that it can kind of be kept under control.
Have you as an individual been happy with that your health and your, I suppose, safety has been put first and foremost by the league? Have you had any concerns about the possibility of catching COVID over the last few weeks and months?
Personally, I haven't, no, to be honest. Kind of when we came back, the very first day of training, they kind of told us we have to kind of keep in our own little bubble, you know, that we can't afford to be bringing COVID into the dressing room, you know, because if someone does that and it's kind of snowballs, and next thing the league is gone, you know. So everyone kind of realises that, I'm sure, not just in Sligo, but everyone around the league. And I think like it is a professional league, and I think the protocols have shown that at games and everything, it's well managed. And like I said, every day we're temperature checks before training. It's happened on occasions that boys have been turned around because they were too high, like you said. But yeah, we're masks, social distancing, and so I think that has kind of lessened my fear of catching it, you know.
In terms of the next couple of weeks, obviously you've talked about the potential for a lockdown. We all hope it doesn't come to that, because I think sport, even if we can't physically get there, being able to watch it on Watch LOI, which has been phenomenal for the most part, 99% of it has been exceptional. Just to be able to watch the games wherever you want from the comfort of your own house has been great. Even without being able to get to games, it's so important that sport is still there, because it creates the discussion, it creates the interaction with supporters, even if it's all virtual at the moment. What would happen in your life? How different would your life be if the league went in the morning?
I suppose it'd be more heartbreaking than anything. I suppose you'd be basically losing a whole year out of your career, and obviously if it goes now you wouldn't know what the story would be for next season. But yeah, I think like you said, obviously with matches being back, no matter what sport it is, it gives people something to talk about. Back in the real thick of the lockdown, there was nothing on the TV, so you couldn't even talk about matches or anything, you know. So I think it gives I suppose people something to talk about, or like you said, just something to watch, you know. So obviously myself, I'd still have college and all that kind of crack, so I'd be kept busy. But yeah, I wouldn't really, and I think a lot of people would be the same, that they hope it wouldn't go to that, you know.
How do you think the league is going to fare out? I probably shouldn't ask you how you think who's going to win the league, but at this moment in time it looks very much like Shamrock Rovers might have the league wrapped up at the weekend. I know they were your last opponents. You got very up close and personal with some of them that night, 4-0 on the night. How disappointing is it to be that far off at that point?
It is.
Or is that a fair reflection of the teams on the night?
I think so, yeah. Like obviously they gave us quite a beating up there, but any team will do well to go up there and not get a hiding, I suppose. You see, they bet Waterford the week before us, 6-1 I think it was, and they bet Dundalk the week before that again, 4-0. So obviously Tallagh's a tough place to go. They have an unreal style of football, you know, and their pitch helps it. It's a massive area. But yeah, listen, they're champions elect, I suppose. But I suppose that doesn't really affect us going into the match. You just kind of have to go out and say, all right, we'll give it our best shot. And unfortunately on the night, it just wasn't good enough, you know.
Let's rewind a little bit into the conversation and talk about the last three games, the league games of the season at least. It's Shells this weekend, and then there's Cork City at home, and then again a trip to Dundalk on the last day of the season, I suppose. Dundalk have faltered a little bit. I know they drew with Finn Harps. They just about got past Cork last night. They're there for the beating if they're maybe a little bit off your game and you can rise it a little bit, there's a potential 3 points there. You've beaten them already once this season. You beat them last season. It's not anything new for a Sligo Rovers side. In terms of the run-in, what's required to get into that 4th place, to give yourselves a chance?
I think it's definitely attainable, yeah, and I think our best chance at getting that 4th spot is 9 points in the next few games, because like I said earlier, we've kind of taken it out of our hands, so we kind of just have to go out, try and pick up as many points as possible and hope that the likes of Waterford and St. Pat's, they drop points, you know. But obviously Shells at the weekend, we've done one over them before, so I think it definitely will be a tough encounter again, especially going up to Tolka Park. Cork, we'll be looking to get one back over them, especially after the last night out. And obviously Dundalk, the last day of the season, they'll be coming off the back of a hectic schedule, so hopefully, like you said, they'll be there for the taking. And
of course the FAI Cup thrown in the middle of all that as well. Sligo, well known in FAI Cup circles, I think 3 titles in the last 10 years, so maybe we can make that a 4th as well. It'd be great for the Northwest and for the club as well, just for that pick me up, because there's been a lot of negativity coming out of all aspects of life, and it's great. Some of the stories that are coming out of Sligo this year have been really positive. The fundraising by the supporters was exceptional back in, I think it was April or May, and it's just been a good news story after good news story. It's great to see it. And Niall, thanks very much for joining me. The best of luck in the last, hopefully, 6 games of the season as you head for a FAI Cup final, hopefully. Keep the fingers crossed. And thanks for having a chat with us here at Leitrim Daily.
Thanks for having me.